The city glittered below the penthouse, like nothing in Arden Hale's life was falling apart. But in a single moment, everything changed. She wasn't supposed to come home early. She wasn't supposed to hear laughter from the hallway, and she definitely wasn't supposed to walk up to the glass door of her husband's private lounge, only to freeze at what she saw inside. Her billionaire husband, the man the world worshipped, wasn't alone. A woman was in his lap. Her hands were in his hair. His mouth was pressed to hers like Arden had never existed. And in the warm glow of that room, with nothing but a sheet of glass between them, Arden realized the man who vowed to love her didn't even respect her. And what hurt the most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how easy it was for him. But listen closely, because here's the twist that nobody expected. The same man who tried to break her that night unknowingly set her up to become the one running his entire empire by morning. This is the powerful, heartbreaking, empowering story of how a gentle woman rose from humiliation to become the CEO of the very company her husband tried to push her out of. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single second of this journey. Hey family, whether you're brand new here or one of our returning viewers, welcome back to Mr. Donovan Stories. This channel brings you emotional, powerful, life-changing stories every single week. Before we go deeper into Arden's unbelievable rise, please do Mr. Donovan one favor. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and join our storytelling family. Your support helps the channel grow, and it means the world to us. Long before her heart was shattered behind a glass door, before she became the unexpected force who would rise above the empire built to silence her, Arden Hale was simply a woman who loved softly, and softness to her was never weakness. She grew up believing that kindness held its own unshakable strength, the kind that didn't need to shout or demand attention. It simply existed, steady and warm. That was the core of who she was, thoughtful in the way she listened, gentle in the way she spoke, fearless in the way she cared. People noticed that about her, even when she didn't notice it in herself. Back then, Arden's world was simple. She worked part-time as a writer for a small literacy foundation, spending her afternoons with kids who had no access to books at home. She taught them how stories could build worlds, how imagination could turn fear into courage, and how words could soften the sharp edges of life. She believed that stories healed. She just didn't know she would one day need one to heal herself. The night she met Donovan Hale felt like something written by fate. It was a charity gala, rented ballroom, dim chandeliers, too many cameras, overly polished smiles. Arden wasn't there to impress anyone. She was simply representing the foundation, standing near a display about literacy programs for underfunded communities. She remembered talking passionately to a small group about why creativity mattered for children, not for grades, not for career paths, but for escape, hope, imagination. It was mid-sentence. Stories give them a place to dream safely, when she noticed him watching her from across the room. Donovan Hale. Even then, he looked like someone carved out of success. Sharp suit, confident, posture, presence that drew attention whether he wanted it or not. But what struck Arden wasn't his wealth or his power. It was the way he was looking at her, not at the display, not at the audience around her, at her. With curiosity, interest, maybe even admiration. When the crowd filtered away, he approached her. "I've never heard someone talk about stories like that," he had said, voice deep but unexpectedly warm. "Most people in this world forget how powerful imagination is." Arden blushed a little. "It's easy to forget when you're busy surviving." "And you?" he asked. "Are you surviving or living?" It was a simple question, but a surprising one. Arden laughed softly. "Trying to do a little of both, I guess." He smiled, and it wasn't a cold, businesslike smile. It was genuine, human, as if the CEO mask slipped for a moment, and the man behind it stepped forward. He spent the rest of the evening talking with her, listening with a level of intention she rarely experienced. When he asked for her number, he did it carefully, almost shyly, as though afraid she might say no. If someone had told her then how different the future would be, she would have never believed them. In the beginning, their love felt soft and pure. Vorian brought Arden flowers just because, picked her up from work with warm eyes and warmer hands, held her as if she was something precious. They spent evenings cooking together in her tiny apartment, him chopping vegetables too, aggressively, her laughing while telling him to slow down before he cut off a finger. Some nights they danced barefoot in the kitchen, quiet music filling the room, Vorian resting his forehead against hers, as if she were the only woman in his world. He wasn't cold back then. He wasn't harsh. He wasn't cruel. He was attentive, charming, gentle, in a way she didn't expect a billionaire to be. And that softness is what she married. Not the empire, not the wealth, not the reputation, him, or the man she thought he was. The first change was small, almost too small to notice. A sigh he didn't explain, a distracted look during dinner, a meeting he couldn't cancel, a hand that used to reach for hers, pausing halfway. Arden assumed it was stress. Hale dynamics had grown rapidly, and Vorian carried an entire corporation on his shoulders. She tried to be supportive, to take pressure off his day. She listened to him talk about work, brought him meals when he stayed, up late, left little handwritten notes reminding him to breathe. Sometimes he smiled at them. Sometimes he didn't notice them at all. But she believed in him, believed in them, and he still had moments, rare but real, where he pulled her close, kissed the top of her head and whispered, "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those moments kept her hopeful, kept her trying, kept her loving, even when the cracks grew wider. Months passed, and the shifts in Vorian came slowly, like a dimming light that no one notices until the room is already half dark. Arden had always believed that love required patience, and she gave him that. She understood that success came with stress, that responsibility came with pressure. She tried to be the softness in his storm, the calm in his whirlwind, the part of his life he didn't have to fight. But eventually, even she couldn't ignore the signs. Vorian started coming home later. Not late in the typical corporate sense, not an hour here or there, but late enough that Arden began falling asleep alone. She would wake up to the sound of his briefcase dropping onto the dresser or the bathroom light, flicking on at 1:47 a.m., sharp. Some nights, he didn't come home at all. He always had an excuse ready. Late meeting, unexpected emergency, too much traffic leaving the tower, just crashed in the guest suite. But none of the excuses came with warmth. None came with reassurance. None came with a kiss or a touch, or even a look that made her feel seen. Arden told herself it was temporary, a phase, a season. But seasons change. Vorian didn't. To cope with the growing gap between them, Arden started spending more time learning about Hale dynamics. It wasn't forced on her. She wasn't trying to be the CEO's wife in any public way. She just wanted to feel close to him again. So she learned the company's history, every department's purpose, the community programs he claimed to support, the projects he always said he wanted to expand but never had time for. She attended charity meetings, spoke with team members, read old proposals that had been buried under piles of corporate reports. And slowly, quietly, Arden began contributing. Not through authority, not through position, through heart. She helped a small team improve their community outreach designs. She assisted interns who were struggling to adapt to the corporate environment. She made suggestions during charitable planning that actually increased engagement. People noticed her, genuinely noticed her. Not because she was Vorian Hale's wife, but because she cared. Employees greeted her. Managers asked for her thoughts. Even the building's security guards smiled warmly whenever they saw her arrive. Arden wasn't trying to take anyone's place. She was trying to be useful, helpful, connected. But what she didn't know then was that sometimes people who feel control slipping don't appreciate kindness. They fear it. One afternoon, while Arden was reviewing a youth tech proposal with the innovation department, Vorian appeared in the doorway. His presence filled the room instantly. Sharp posture, unreadable. Expression, cold energy that made conversations stop mid-sentence. Everyone stiffened. Vorian didn't look at them. He looked only at Arden. "I didn't know you were here," he said, voice flat. Arden smiled softly. "I was just helping them organize the presentation. They're so close to—" "That wasn't my question." The room fell silent again. Her smile faded. I thought it would be all right." Vorian stepped closer, lowering his voice until only she, and everyone pretending not to listen, could hear. "We've talked about this. Don't insert yourself into things you don't understand." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Her breath hitched. "I'm not inserting myself. I'm just—" "You're making things difficult," he cut in. "Let the professionals handle it." Arden felt the sting immediately. The team avoided eye contact. Someone coughed awkwardly. She nodded quietly, stepping aside. "I understand." But what she felt wasn't understanding. It was something else. A quiet ache. A slow, sinking realization. He didn't want her near his world. Not really. That night, unable to fall asleep, Arden found herself thinking about one of their happiest early memories, a moment that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. It was their first anniversary. Vorian had rented the rooftop garden of a small boutique hotel. Candles lined the pathways, soft music drifted through the air, and, in the very center was a table set for two beneath hanging lights. She remembered how nervous he was, hiding it behind a forced calm. When they danced that night, Vorian held her with a tenderness that made time slow. His forehead rested against hers, his hands steady on her waist, his voice soft as he whispered, "You are the calm in my chaos, Arden. You're the only thing that makes sense." She had believed him. She wanted to believe him still, but as she lay awake alone in their king-sized bed, with his side cold and untouched, that memory felt like a cruel echo. He didn't hold her like that anymore. He didn't look at her like that anymore. Love had become something distant, something she had to chase, something slipping through her fingers like water. The weeks that followed were marked by subtle disdain, the kind that didn't come with yelling or obvious cruelty, but with dismissive glances, clipped responses, and a refusal to acknowledge her efforts. If Arden mentioned a new idea, Vorian called it naive. If she offered help, he said she was interfering. If she tried to talk, he said he was tired. If she tried to touch him, he gently moved away. She kept trying. He kept retreating. And quietly, almost invisibly, the man she once knew evaporated. The distance between Arden and Vorian didn't explode into being. It unfolded quietly, like a slow winter settling over their marriage. One cold day at a time. One unspoken disappointment at a time. One unanswered gesture at a time. Eventually, the warmth they once shared dimmed into something almost unrecognizable. Their penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, elegant furniture. But beauty meant nothing when silence filled the spaces where laughter used to live. They ate dinner at the same table, but not together. Arden would sit across from him, trying to start a conversation, asking about his day, offering encouragement, trying to reach the man she loved. Vorian answered with, "It was fine. Nothing important. I'm tired." She tried to tell him about her own day, the projects she helped with, the people she met, stories that usually made him smile. But he no longer looked up from his phone, or his laptop, or his glass. It was as if he lived beside her, but not with her, and Arden began to realize something heartbreaking. It wasn't just stress. He was choosing the distance. There was one night, one rare moment, where the man she fell in love with flickered back into existence. Arden had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from a long day. A soft blanket covered her shoulders, and she vaguely felt someone lifting her gently, carefully. Warm arms wrapped around her. A steady heartbeat pulsed against her cheek. Fingers brushed through her hair with an old familiarity she thought she'd lost. She didn't fully wake, just drifted in the hazy border between sleep and consciousness. Vorian carried her to bed, laying her down gently, tucking the blanket around her like she was fragile and precious. For a brief second, she felt a featherlight kiss on her forehead. a kiss she hadn't felt in months. She whispered his name without opening her eyes. He froze. There was a pause, long, uncertain, before he quietly stepped away, retreating to the bathroom. The door clicked shut. The tenderness vanished with it. The next morning, he acted as though nothing had happened. Arden clung to that brief softness. But even she knew, a single moment wasn't enough to heal an entire collapse. As Hale dynamics continued to grow, so did Vorian's ego. With every new expansion, every new contract, every headline praising his brilliance, he became harder, colder, more distant. Arden tried again, more than once, to have honest conversations. "Vorian, can we talk? I feel like we're drifting. I'm busy. Just for a moment." "I said I'm busy, Arden." She tried again another night. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." "Then why do you feel so far away?" "You're imagining things." Another attempt. "I miss us." Long silence. Then, "You're overthinking again." Overthinking, overreacting, overstepping. Everything she did became too much. But the truth was simpler. She wasn't too much. She just wasn't enough for him anymore. One evening, she decided to try something different. She cooked his favorite dinner, slow-roasted lamb with rosemary, the dish she made the night he proposed. She dressed softly, wearing the pale blue satin he once said made her look like a quiet piece of heaven. She lit candles, played the music they used to dance to, and waited. She wanted to remind him of them, of the love they once had, of the tenderness he used to show so easily. When Vorian arrived home, she smiled, her eyes hopeful. "I made dinner for us." He didn't smile back, didn't soften, didn't even stop walking. "Not tonight," he muttered, loosening his tie. "I already ate." "Oh, okay. Maybe we can still talk for a few." "I have work." He walked into his office and shut the door behind him. The candles flickered. The music kept playing. The smell of warm food filled the room, and Arden stood there, alone, staring at the table set for two. Later that night, she quietly blew out the candles one by one, her chest aching with every dimming flame. From that night forward, something unspoken shifted permanently. Vorian no longer pretended to care. Arden no longer pretended she didn't notice. The man she loved had faded away, replaced by someone sharp, cold, unreachable. And as she lay awake in their bed, his side empty once again, Arden realized something she had never wanted to admit. She wasn't losing him. She had already lost him. And the world was about to show her just how deep that loss would cut. Because the next chapter of her life wasn't going to break her heart quietly. It was going to shatter it in front of an entire room. And there would be witnesses. Arden arrived at Hale Dynamics the next morning with a quiet determination she couldn't fully explain. Her heart was tired, bruised, and aching in places she hadn't known existed. But she told herself one truth as she walked through the revolving doors. If she couldn't fix her marriage, she could at least do something meaningful here. The lobby greeted her with warm smiles from people who genuinely appreciated her presence. She greeted them back with subtle nods and soft hellos, trying to hide the heaviness she carried from the night before. She wasn't ready to talk. She wasn't ready to break. She wasn't even ready to admit to herself how shattered she felt. But she could still stand. She took the elevator up to the 39th floor, where the morning sunlight spilled through tall windows and workers rushed between departments. Arden headed straight for the innovation boardroom, eager to watch the presentation she had helped shape. It wasn't her project officially, but she believed in it, deeply. The scholarship could change lives, open doors, and inspire kids in a way few programs could. She arrived early, found a seat near the side of the table, and exchanged nervous smiles with the young analysts who had worked tirelessly on the presentation. They were excited, grateful, hopeful. Arden wanted them to be proud of what they created. When Vorian stepped into the room, the temperature seemed to drop. His entrance always commanded the air, not with admiration, but with tension. People sat straighter. Conversations halted. Laptops clicked shut. Even the silence felt like it was standing at attention for him. Arden's heart fluttered with the tiniest hope that maybe, just maybe, he would acknowledge her. Maybe he remembered her efforts. Maybe last night had been a lapse, one he regretted. But Vorian's eyes passed right over her, as if she were no one at all. He took his place at the head of the table, adjusted his cufflinks, and without greeting anyone, opened the meeting. The young analyst presenting the scholarship initiative stood nervously, clicking to the first slide. Before a single sentence could be spoken, Vorian lifted a hand. "We will not be considering this proposal." The analyst froze, color draining from his face. The room fell silent. Arden blinked in confusion, unsure if she had heard correctly. Vorian's voice cut through the air, sharp, cold, final. "This project is illogical, financially careless, and a complete misuse of our time." The young analyst swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Sir, we spent months gathering data. The projections—" "I don't care about projections." Vorian stood straighter, his presence stretching taller and darker. "This is not what Hale Dynamics invests in. And frankly, this proposal feels like someone has been interfering in processes they do not understand." Arden felt something in her stomach twist. The word interfering struck too close. Vorian turned slowly, deliberately, and his gaze settled on her for the first time that morning. But there was no warmth, no affection, no hint of the man she once married. His expression was cold calculation. "And you," he said, his tone slicing through the room, "need to learn to stay in your lane." Arden's breath caught. Whispers flickered around the table like sparks. Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably, their faces tightening with sympathy they were too afraid to voice. Arden forced herself to stay seated, to stay composed, even as her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. Vorian continued, his voice smooth but devastating. "Hale Dynamics is not a playground for you to test ideas. It's a corporation, a serious one. And the last thing we need is unnecessary involvement from individuals who have no business experience." Every word landed like a blow. He wasn't just shutting her down. He was diminishing her entirely. The room held its breath. Arden's throat tightened as she slowly rose from her seat. Her hands trembled, but she locked them together, trying to look steadier than she felt. She didn't trust her voice, so she didn't speak. She simply offered a small nod to the team she had supported and turned toward the door. She heard it before she reached the exit. "Effective immediately," Vorian said, "Arden is to be excluded from all meetings, project files, and internal discussions. She has no authority here. Make sure her access is revoked." Arden stopped walking. Just for a moment. One heartbeat. The sting behind her eyes burned, but she refused to let a single tear fall in front of them. She pushed the door open and stepped out into the hallway, her vision blurring, her pulse echoing in her ears. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt like the ending of something she had been desperately trying to save. She stood still for a long moment, gripping the railing of the corridor, letting the weight of humiliation settle into her bones. Inside the room, she heard muffled voices, confusion, discomfort, whispers too low to understand. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. Arden straightened her shoulders, inhaled a shaky breath, and walked toward the elevator. She didn't hear her name called. She didn't hear footsteps behind her. No one followed. The world inside that boardroom kept moving without her. When the elevator doors closed, she finally exhaled, a trembling breath that carried heartbreak, disbelief, and the faintest flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Resolve. For the first time, she realized something painfully clear. Her marriage wasn't the only thing falling apart. Her identity was slipping through the cracks. Her dignity was being chipped away piece by piece. Her heart was being silenced. And Vorian, the man she once believed would protect her, was the one holding the hammer. She didn't cry. Not yet. She simply stood in the silent elevator, staring at her reflection in the gold paneling. Her eyes looked empty. Her shoulders looked small. And the woman staring back at her didn't look like the Arden she used to know. But she didn't know that life was already preparing her for a rise so powerful, so unexpected, that the same people watching her leave in shame would soon be standing when she walked back in. The elevator chimed, the doors opened, the world outside was still moving, and Arden stepped out without realizing that her life, her entire destiny, was already shifting behind the scenes. Arden didn't remember much about the walk out of the building, not the clicking of her heels, not the curious glances from employees passing by, not even the security guard offering her a sympathetic nod as she moved through the glass doors into the cold outside air. All she felt was the way her heart seemed to fold in on itself. She didn't stop walking. Couldn't. If she stopped, she knew the weight of humiliation would crush her in a single moment. So she simply moved forward, letting the late afternoon breeze cool the warmth burning inside her chest. The city was loud, cars honking, people talking, sirens in the distance. But Arden felt strangely disconnected from it all, as though she were floating somewhere above the noise. Her mind replayed the boardroom scene again and again, each repetition sharper, crueler. Stay in your lane. You don't understand business. No authority here. Revoked access. Dismissed in front of colleagues. Stripped of respect. She had never felt more invisible. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She didn't look at it immediately. Her fingers trembled, her stomach twisted, and for a moment she thought about ignoring it. But the buzzing persisted, vibrating coldly in her palm until she finally glanced down. A single message lit up the screen. You embarrass me today. Don't show up at the office again. She stopped walking. The words glowed starkly against the evening light, sinking deep into her chest like a blade. Embarrassed him? He humiliated her in front of an entire room. And somehow, she was the embarrassment. Arden's breath stuttered. She blinked hard, swallowing the lump forming in her throat. A woman passing by accidentally brushed against her shoulder, but Arden hardly felt it. All she could see were those words. All she could feel was the coldness in them. She didn't respond. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she finally realized there was nothing left to say. She began walking again. Faster this time, letting the city blur past her. The noise faded, replaced by the roar of her own heartbeat in her ears. She walked until her feet ached, until her body felt too heavy to carry the silent heartbreak sitting inside it. By the time she reached the neighborhood where her closest friend lived, the sun had fully set, casting long shadows across the streets. Warm lights glowed from apartment windows, laughter drifted from an open balcony, and somewhere nearby, someone was playing soft guitar music. It was a world she used to love. Tonight, it only made her feel how alone she was. She reached Marin's door and knocked softly. It opened almost instantly, revealing Marin in an oversized sweater. Her hair messy, eyes widening with concern the moment she saw Arden's face. Oh my God. Arden? Her voice softened. What happened? Arden didn't answer, not with words. Her expression said enough. Marin stepped aside without hesitation. Arden walked in, the warmth of the small apartment wrapping around her like a blanket she didn't know she needed. Marin closed the door and turned to her gently. Come here. And Arden finally broke. She collapsed into her friend's arms, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, breath shaking with every exhale. Marin held her firmly, stroking her back with slow, steady movements. I'm here, Marin whispered. You're safe here. Whatever it is, you're not facing it alone. Arden didn't speak for a long time. She let the tears fall, let the weight she had been carrying release in quiet sobs. Marin guided her to the couch, wrapped her in a soft blanket, and handed her a warm cup of tea. When Arden finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. He humiliated me. Marin listened as she told the story, the meeting, the dismissal, the cruel message. Arden's voice cracked at certain parts, her hands trembling, her gaze distant. When she finished, Marin sat silently for a moment, absorbing every detail. Arden, she said softly, that wasn't a mistake. That wasn't a bad day. That was cruelty. Arden lowered her eyes. I keep asking myself if I did something wrong. You didn't. Marin lifted her chin gently. And even if you had, That's not how you treat someone you love. Arden closed her eyes, feeling another wave of pain wash over her. I don't know who he is anymore. He doesn't know who you are either, Marin said firmly. He doesn't see you. He doesn't value you. And that's not your failure. Arden didn't argue. She couldn't. Marin's words were the truth she had been avoiding. They sat in quiet for a while, the kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. Outside, a soft rain began tapping against the balcony railing, and the sound soothed the tension in Arden's body. Marin eventually spoke again, gently but firmly. What are you going to do? Arden stared into her tea, her reflection rippling in the surface. I don't want to go back, she whispered. Marin nodded, squeezing her hand. Then don't. Arden didn't know whether she was ready to leave her marriage. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like. She didn't know if she was strong enough to rebuild anything on her own. But she knew one thing. She was done being humiliated. She was done being dismissed. She was done begging for a love that no longer existed. She spent the rest of the evening curled under the blanket, exhausted from the emotional storm. Marin made dinner and kept her company, never pushing, never prying, simply letting Arden exist in the safety of someone who cared. And as the night stretched on, Arden felt the smallest spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope, not yet, but clarity. She deserved better than the shadows she had been living in. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly anticipate, was that life was already weaving something into place. Something big, something that would not just change her future, but rewrite everything she thought she knew about herself. Arden woke early the next morning, long before the sun rose, long before Marin stirred in the other room. Her mind had barely rested. It hovered in that strange place between exhaustion and clarity. She felt drained, hollow but oddly calm, as if her soul had finally accepted something her heart had been fighting for years. For the first time in a long time, she didn't check her phone, didn't wonder if Vorian messaged, didn't hope for an apology that she knew would never come. She simply sat on the edge of the sofa, staring out at the dim sky, letting the silence soothe her. When Marin emerged, sleepy and wrapped in a blanket, she offered Arden a soft smile. You don't have to decide everything today. Just breathe. Arden nodded, appreciating the gentleness. She didn't know what the future held, but she wasn't ready to disappear. If she was going to step away, she wanted to do it with dignity, not as the silent victim Vorian expected her to be. Which was why, after showering and pulling herself into clean clothes, she said something that surprised even her. I need to stop by the company. Marin blinked. Are you sure? Arden swallowed. I only want to collect my things. Nothing else. Marin hesitated, then squeezed her hand. I'll drive you. The building looked different when Arden stepped inside again. Or maybe she did. People who usually brightened when they saw her now stared with uncertainty, sympathy, or careful politeness. It was clear word had spread. Nothing in a corporation moved faster than humiliation. She kept her head high. She wasn't going to break again. She headed to her small workstation area on one of the lower floors, quietly gathering the notebooks she used for community project ideas, the pen set she loved, and a few personal items she had left behind. Each item felt like a reminder of who she had been trying to become. She didn't expect anyone to find her. But someone did. A soft voice broke the silence. Arden. She turned and saw Tavian Cross standing in the doorway. The HR director with the calm voice, thoughtful eyes, and a presence that never seemed to demand attention but always commanded respect. He was holding a sealed folder in one hand, his expression serious but gentle. Tavian, Arden said softly. I'm just here to clear my desk. I won't be long. He stepped further into the room, his gaze warm with concern. I heard what happened yesterday. I'm really sorry. Arden offered a small, polite smile. Thank you. But it's all right. I'm moving on. Tavian hesitated, his fingers tightening around the folder. There's something you need to see before you leave. She frowned. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly, then extended the folder toward her. This came in late last night, a shareholder update. It wasn't supposed to be filed without your knowledge, but it was. Arden stared at the envelope, confusion stitching her brows together. Why would I need to see a shareholder update? Because, Tavian paused, choosing his words carefully. Because you're listed as the majority shareholder. For a moment, Arden didn't understand. Couldn't. She looked down at the folder, then back at him. That has to be a mistake. It's not, Tavian said softly. I checked it 3 times. Her pulse quickened. Her fingers felt suddenly weak as she opened the folder, pulling out the neatly typed documents inside. The numbers didn't lie, the names didn't lie, and neither did the percentage printed clearly beside hers. 52%. Her name held 52% of the company's ownership. Her breath trembled. This can't be real, she whispered. Why would he put my name on this? Tavian stepped closer, his voice quiet and steady. Years ago, your prenup contained a clause requiring a security asset in your name. Vorian chose shares, probably because he assumed you'd never need them. Arden's heart pounded. And the clause states, Tavian continued, that if he violates certain terms, including publicly undermining you or removing your rights within the company, the shares revert fully under your control. She felt the room tilt, the humiliation in the boardroom, the way he revoked her access, the command to keep her away from meetings, the text telling her not to show up. It all clicked into place, each memory falling like a domino. He had broken the agreement himself, and with that, he had handed her the company. Arden's hands shook as she gripped the papers, staring at her name. She wasn't just someone who cared. She wasn't just someone with ideas. She wasn't just the wife he dismissed. She was the owner. Tavian watched her closely, concern etched in his features. Arden, you have more power than you realize, and I know this is overwhelming, but you deserve to see the truth. Her breath quivered, but her voice steadied. What does this mean, legally? It means, Tavian said carefully, that as of right now, Hale Dynamics is under your control. The room fell silent. Arden felt a slow, unfamiliar warmth rise in her chest. Not joy, not revenge, something quieter, something steadier, something she thought she had lost a long time ago. Strength. The realization washed through her, not as a shout, not as a shock, but as a whisper from some forgotten part of her heart. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't small. She wasn't irrelevant. She had been underestimated for so long. Even she had forgotten what she was capable of. Tavian took a cautious step forward. Whatever you decide to do next, I'll help you. You're not alone in this. Arden lifted her eyes to his, really seeing him for the first time. The warmth, the sincerity, the quiet steadiness. It made something inside her settle. Thank you, she said softly. And for the first time in days, a new emotion flickered in her chest. Not fear, not heartbreak, not confusion. Purpose. She didn't know what she was going to do next. Not fully, not yet. But she knew this. She wasn't leaving today. Not anymore. Life had handed her the truth. Now she had to decide what to do with it. Arden didn't leave the building. Not after discovering the truth. Not after seeing her name printed beside the controlling interest of Hale Dynamics. Not after feeling a quiet spark of something she hadn't felt in years. The sense that her voice finally had a place to stand. The halls looked different now as she walked through them, carrying the folder close to her chest. She wasn't moving like someone who had been humiliated. She wasn't moving like someone escaping. She walked like someone awakening. Each step felt heavier but steadier, grounded with new understanding. Marin, who had been waiting by the elevator with her car keys ready, froze when Arden returned without warning. Arden? What happened? You look different. Arden handed Marin the folder. Marin blinked as she scanned the pages, her jaw tensing, then dropping open. Her eyes shot back up with shock and a growing spark of outrage on Arden's behalf. Arden Hale, she whispered, voice trembling with disbelief. You own the company. Arden didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply inhaled deeply, trying to process the staggering truth settling against her ribs. Marin placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tell me what you want to do." Arden hesitated, because even now, she didn't want revenge. She didn't want to destroy Vorian's entire world, even if he had nearly destroyed hers. That wasn't who she was. What she wanted was simple. "I want my voice back," Arden said quietly. "I want to stand in the place he told me I didn't belong, and remind myself that I do." Marin nodded slowly, a soft, proud expression forming. "Then let's start there." Arden decided to return upstairs, not to confront Vorian, not yet, but to understand what she now controlled, to see the company not through the eyes of a sidelined wife, but through the eyes of a leader. Tavian walked beside her, carrying the legal documents like a silent shield. He didn't push her or pressure her. He simply stayed close, keeping pace with her steps, offering support without demanding space. They arrived on the 45th floor, the executive suite. Arden had been there many times in the past. She used to bring Vorian lunch when he forgot to eat, or sit quietly, while he worked, trying to be close in whatever quiet ways she could. But entering now felt different. The receptionist startled when she saw Arden. "Mrs. Hale, Arden, are you here for Mr. Hale?" Arden paused. "No," she said softly but firmly. "I'm here for the company." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. She walked past the glass offices, past the long conference table where she had been humiliated, and stopped in front of Vorian's door. It was closed, as always. He preferred his power sealed behind barriers. But Arden didn't push it open. Not yet. She needed to breathe. Her heartbeat quickened as she looked at the frosted glass. The same kind of glass through which she had seen everything only days ago. The betrayal, the intimacy that wasn't hers, the final crack that shattered the illusion of their marriage. She swallowed hard, forcing the memory away. Tavian noticed her pause. "You don't have to do anything today. You can take time to decide." Arden lifted her gaze toward him, and in his eyes she saw something she had been missing, not pity, but respect. "No," she whispered. "I'm done waiting." She turned slightly toward him. "What would be the first step, legally?" Tavian straightened. "Filing a control notice to the board. From there, you can request an emergency session. They'll have to respond immediately." The idea seemed unreal. Savage, empowering, terrifying. "I don't want chaos," Arden murmured. "And you won't create any," Tavian said gently. "You're capable of leading with more grace than he ever did." Arden looked down at her hands, the same hands Vorian had dismissed, belittled, and sidelined. Now they were the hands that held his future. She inhaled deeply, a slow breath that anchored her. "Let's file the notice," she said. Tavian nodded, and for the first time since the storm began, Arden felt she wasn't walking into darkness alone. As they made their way to the legal office, employees glanced curiously, drawn to the quiet intensity around her. Arden didn't walk like the CEO's wife anymore. She walked like the woman who would soon take his place. While Tavian spoke with the legal team, Arden stood by the large office window, watching the city spread in front of her. Tall, vast, indifferent. She felt small for a moment. But then, something shifted. This moment, wasn't about Vorian. It wasn't about punishment, or retaliation, or even proving him wrong. It was about proving herself right. She had always been more than the quiet shadow at his side. She had always been capable. She had always been worthy. She had always been enough. All she had needed was a chance to remember. When the legal director approached with the documents, Arden read each line slowly. Her signature would put everything in motion. Her signature would change the entire future of Hale Dynamics. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. She signed. The pen glided across the page in a smooth, steady stroke. When she finished, the director nodded with solemn respect. "The board will convene today. You'll be notified as soon as they're assembled." Arden stepped back, exhaling shakily. Her life was no longer hanging in the air. It was moving. A quiet fire burned in her chest. unfamiliar but welcome. She turned to Tavian, who had been watching her with a soft, thoughtful expression. "You did something brave today," he said. Arden shook her head faintly. "I did something necessary. And sometimes," Tavian replied gently, "those are the same thing." For the first time since she left her home, Arden smiled. Small, soft, but real. She wasn't the same woman who walked out of that boardroom in humiliation. She wasn't the same woman who stood outside the glass door, watching her husband betray her. She wasn't the same woman who collected her belongings in silence. She was someone different now, someone rising, someone remembering her worth, someone stepping into the beginning of her own story. Word of the emergency board session moved faster than whispers, faster than the shock that spread through the upper floors. Hale Dynamics had weathered market crashes, lawsuits, and leadership shakeups, but nothing prepared them for the quiet storm about to step into the center of it all. Arden arrived early. She stood in the hallway outside the boardroom, the same hallway she had walked through countless times, always as a guest, always careful, always trying not to take up too much space. But today, she wasn't shrinking. Today, she held her shoulders straighter, her chin slightly lifted, not with arrogance, but with self-respect. Her palms were cold, though. She wouldn't pretend otherwise. Courage didn't erase fear, it simply walked beside it. Marin had insisted on coming with her, standing a step behind like a protective anchor. Tavian stood on her other side, composed and steady, giving her the kind of strength that didn't shout but reassured. The boardroom doors opened. Executives looked up as Arden entered, some startled, some uneasy, some completely confused. Arden could feel their eyes on her, the unspoken questions gathering thicker with every step she took. At the center of the long table sat Vorian. He didn't rise, didn't greet her, didn't even mask the annoyance flickering across his face. He had no idea. His voice cut through the murmurs. "Arden, this isn't the time for—" She placed the documents on the table in front of him. Tavian slid a second copy to the board members. Vorian picked up the papers, skimming them lazily at first. Then his posture changed. The lazy confidence shattered. His fingers tightened on the edges of the pages. His eyes darted across the lines a second, then a third time. Arden watched the exact moment realization hit him. His jaw clenched. His breath caught. The color drained from his face almost imperceptibly, but enough for her to see it. "What is this?" he demanded, though his voice was less steady now. "Legal documentation," Arden said quietly, her voice threading calm through the room. "Signed, confirmed, filed. This—" Vorian's eyes snapped to her. "This is ridiculous. You can't—" "You broke the agreement," she said softly. "The one you created, the one you insisted on." The board members exchanged glances, flipping through the papers, reading each clause with widening eyes. Vorian shook his head sharply, as if trying to wake himself from a bad dream. "This is a misunderstanding. I didn't—" "You dismissed me from all involvement with the company in front of department heads," Arden said. "You restricted my access. You sent a message telling me not to return. That wasn't, Arden. That was a private matter. You weren't—" "It was a violation," Tavian interjected with calm professionalism. "Legally, publicly, and contractually. The transfer clause activated immediately." Vorian's glare snapped to him. "You stay out of—" "He's doing his job," Arden said softly, stepping forward. And for the first time, Vorian stopped talking, not because he wanted to, because the room had shifted, because the air around her wasn't the air of a timid woman anymore. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't explaining. She wasn't trying to be understood. She was stating the truth. Arden's voice remained gentle, but it held strength he had never bothered to see. "The company is under my control now. Legally. Fully." The room went silent, a thick, stunned, breathless silence. Vorian leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he searched. Her face, trying to find the version of Arden he could manipulate. The one who cried quietly. The one who forgave too easily. The one who made excuses for his coldness. But she wasn't there. Arden stood steady, calm, composed, holding her dignity like a shield made of light. "Arden," he said slowly, "you don't understand how this company works. You don't belong in this room." "That's what you believe," she said gently. "Not what the truth is." Her calmness seemed to unnerve him far more than anger would have. A board member cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hale, are you officially invoking your right to assume leadership?" Arden breathed in deeply, one slow breath, then another. "Yes." The word didn't burst out. It didn't tremble. It didn't shrink. It simply existed, clear, grounded, final. She continued, "I want Hale Dynamics to thrive, to grow, to innovate. And I believe that requires a shift in leadership, one built on transparency, respect, and new direction." The board murmured among themselves. Another member spoke up, nervous but intrigued. "And your intentions for the current CEO?" Arden didn't look at Vorian when she answered. "I'm requesting an internal review of his recent decisions. The board will determine the appropriate temporary adjustments. For now, he will step back." Vorian stood abruptly. "You can't do this." Tavian placed the legal validation on the table. You think you can run my company?" Vorian snapped, his voice cracking with disbelief and fear. "You think you can replace me?" Arden finally met his eyes, and in that moment he saw it. The strength he had ignored, the resilience he had dismissed, the quiet power he had underestimated. "It was never your company," Arden said softly. "Not entirely, not legally, and not morally." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. She continued, "I'm not replacing you out of anger. I'm stepping forward because the company needs leadership that values every voice, including mine." The room held its breath. Her tone held no venom, no spite, no revenge, only truth. A board member spoke cautiously. Then, "Mrs. Hale, you are now acting CEO, effective immediately." The words settled through the room like a seismic wave. Arden inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of them, the responsibility, the quiet flame in her chest growing steady and warm. Vorian stared at her like he was finally seeing her for the first time. She didn't look away, not out of defiance, but because she no longer needed to. Her place in the room wasn't borrowed anymore. It was earned. It was hers. It always had been. He simply never wanted to see it. When the meeting adjourned, the board members rose, some offering tentative nods of respect. Tavian remained at Arden's side, steady and present. Marin embraced her tightly once the room cleared, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." Arden felt the breath leave her chest in a soft, shaking exhale. She had stepped into the fire. She had walked through it. And somehow, she hadn't burned. She had transformed. She placed her hand on the back of the CEO's chair, her chair now, and felt something inside her settle into place. She had not come to destroy anything. She had come to rebuild. Arden didn't step into her new role with noise or spectacle. She didn't need to. The moment she left the boardroom, the entire building felt different, as if the walls themselves sensed the shift in leadership. Employees paused when she walked by, not out of fear, but out of something warmer, something cautious yet hopeful. She felt their eyes on her, measuring her, wondering who she would become now that the title carried real weight. But Arden didn't rush into the large corner office that had always been Vorian's. Instead, she walked slowly toward it, stopping just before the door. Through the frosted glass, she saw blurred outlines of the furniture. She had visited so many times, always as a guest, never as an equal. Tavian approached quietly, keeping a respectful distance. "It's yours now, if you want it." Arden's eyes lingered on the glass. She remembered standing behind a similar door, watching Betrayal unfold in painful silence. The memory threatened to tighten her chest, but she breathed through it. "It doesn't feel like mine yet," she murmured. Maybe because so much inside that office was built on control, not partnership. Tavian's expression softened. "Then make it yours. Change whatever you want. Tear down what feels wrong. Build something new." Arden looked at him, grateful not just for his guidance, but for the steadiness in his eyes. Tavian wasn't helping her out of obligation. There was something deeper in the way he saw her, something that had begun growing before either of them realized it. She turned away from the door for now. "Later," she said gently. "Right now, I want to understand the people who make this company run." Tavian seemed relieved by her choice. "Then we start with the departments." The rest of the morning unfolded quietly but purposefully. Arden walked through the engineering floor, the finance wing, the innovation lab, places Vorian rarely visited unless something was wrong. She listened to employees as they spoke about their challenges and goals. She asked questions that showed she cared. She remembered their names, their faces, their frustrations. Every floor felt a little brighter when she left. By early afternoon, she had seen parts of Hale dynamics she didn't even know existed. Tavian watched her with a growing sense of admiration. She had natural leadership, not loud or domineering, but warm and steady, like a hand placed gently on a shoulder. A presence that made others feel safe. When they finally paused in one of the smaller lounges overlooking the city, Arden exhaled deeply and leaned against the window frame. "This is a lot," she said quietly. "I didn't expect everyone to look at me the way they did." "People have been waiting for someone like you," Tavian replied. She looked at him, unsure. "Like me. Someone who leads with truth. Someone who listens." Tavian's voice lowered. "Someone who doesn't need fear to be respected." Arden held his gaze for a moment too long, warmth rising beneath her ribs. Tavian was gentle but not timid, quiet but not passive. His presence wrapped around her like a steady breeze, grounding and unintrusive. She cleared her throat softly. "Thank you, really. For everything." "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I'm here because I believe in what you can do." She looked away before he could see how deeply the words affected her. Later that evening, after the building's bustle dimmed and most employees had gone home, Arden found herself alone in what was now, officially, her office. She stood just inside the doorway, staring at the space that once felt untouchable. Vorian's energy still lingered in the air. Expensive cologne, sharp edges, cold surfaces. Memories flickered in her mind. Late nights he spent here instead of with her, phone. Calls he never paused for, attention she begged for silently and never received. She closed the door behind her. A soft knock came seconds later. "It's just me," Tavian called. She opened the door, glad for the interruption. He stepped inside, holding a sleek black folder. "Important documents you'll need for tomorrow's transition briefing." "Thank you," she said, accepting it. For a moment, neither moved. The room felt too quiet. The lights from the city painted soft reflections across the glass walls, warm gold mixing with blue twilight. Tavian's voice gentled. "Are you all right?" Arden nodded, though her voice betrayed her. "It's strange being in here alone." "Then you don't have to be." His tone was soft, honest, almost hesitant. "Not tonight." Arden's breath caught, not from fear, but from the way those words settled into her chest. Gentle, grounding, careful. She stepped closer without realizing it, as if pulled by something neither of them fully named yet. Tavian didn't touch her. He didn't assume. He simply stood in the quiet with her, offering companionship without taking anything. But the air between them shifted, subtly, undeniably. He noticed the way her breath changed. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on her a second too long. Heat collected softly between them, the kind that didn't rush but simmered. The kind born from respect, not hunger. Arden lowered her gaze, smile faint and shy. "You're helping me more than you know. I'm only doing what anyone with sense would do," he murmured. She lifted her eyes again, and the closeness between them tightened. Not physical, emotional, like a door opening slowly and silently. "Not everyone would," she whispered. Tavian's breath slowed. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "But I'm not everyone." Something fluttered in her chest. For the first time since her marriage began to crumble, Arden felt something. Warm, something hopeful, something tender beginning to form. It wasn't loud or overpowering. It was soft, like a small flame discovering oxygen. She stepped back gently, grounding herself. "Tomorrow's a big day." "It is," he agreed. Their eyes lingered for one more weighted moment. Then he gave her a small nod and quietly stepped out of the room, leaving her with her thoughts. And with a heart beating in a rhythm she had forgotten she was capable of feeling. The soft click of the door behind him echoed like a promise. Not of something rushed, not of something forbidden, of something new, something delicate, something honest, something that held the possibility of love in a way she had never known before. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself knew not, to disturb Arden before she stepped into a new chapter of her life. The sky was pale, a soft blur of silver and lavender, and for once she didn't wake with the crushing heaviness of dread. She woke with purpose. Marin had already brewed coffee in the kitchen of her apartment, its warm aroma filling the space. Arden stood by the window, sipping slowly, letting the warmth steady her. Marin watched her carefully, noting the shift in her posture, the calm strength. That had begun replacing the fragile uncertainty from days before. "You look different," Marin said gently. "I feel different," Arden answered. Marin smiled, her voice warm. "Good, because today will test you, but it will also prove you're exactly where you belong." Arden nodded, taking the last sip of coffee before grabbing her bag. She wasn't wearing anything extravagant, just a clean, elegant blouse and fitted suit pants. Power didn't have to be loud, it only needed to be real. When she stepped into the company lobby, employees greeted her with polite nods and curious glances. No one knew exactly what was happening yet, but the shift in atmosphere lingered, like a held breath waiting to exhale. Tavian met her at the elevator, already holding a portfolio of documents. His eyes softened subtly when he saw her. "Morning." "Morning," she replied. There was a stillness to their interaction, not awkward, not tense, more like the quiet gravity of two paths slowly bending toward each other without either person pushing. Something unspoken simmered beneath the surface, but neither tried to name it. They rode the elevator in comfortable silence. When the doors opened to the executive floor, Arden paused, inhaling deeply. Tavian gave her a small nod that said, "You're ready." The moment she stepped out, a few department heads approached her. Some hesitated, unsure of protocol. One finally spoke. "Mrs. Hale, should we continue calling you that, or?" Arden offered a small smile. "Arden is fine." The relief on their faces was instant. She wasn't a tyrant. She wasn't a threat. She was someone they could trust. The transition meeting was scheduled for early morning. The board sat at the long table, waiting. Arden felt the weight of their gazes, but she didn't shrink from it. She took her place at the head of the table, her place now, with steady composure. Tavian stood slightly behind her, attentive and calm. The legal director began speaking, confirming Arden's authority and formalizing the shift in leadership. Vorian had not arrived yet. The empty seat beside hers carried the tension of his absence. Halfway through the briefing, the door finally opened. Vorian walked in. For the first time since the boardroom confrontation, Arden saw him not as her husband, not as the man whose shadow she had lived under, but as a distant figure, someone she no longer recognized. He looked exhausted, angry, desperate. A man unraveling after losing the one thing he could never imagine living without: control. He sat down slowly, eyes locked on Arden. "May I speak privately with my wife?" he asked, voice deceptively calm. "She is in a leadership meeting," Tavian answered before Arden could respond. Vorian shot him a sharp glare. "This is between her and me." Arden's voice remained steady. "Whatever you have to say it here." The shift in her tone startled him. He wasn't speaking to the woman he pushed aside. He was speaking to the woman who now held authority. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his voice low. "You're making a mistake. You don't know how to run a company. You don't understand this world." Arden held his gaze without flinching. "Then I'll learn. But I will not lead the way you did." His jaw tightened. "You can't push me out. You're my wife." The room thickened with silence. Arden exhaled slowly. You pushed yourself out when you chose your pride over partnership, when you chose to humiliate me instead of support me, when you chose betrayal instead of honesty. Vorian's eyes flickered. The mention of betrayal landed like a stone in water, rippling visibly across his expression. Shame, anger, panic. You don't understand what you saw, he said quickly, too quickly. I understand enough, Arden replied softly. Enough to know I am no longer your priority, and I cannot build a life with someone who does not even respect me. Some board members looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. Others watched her with newfound respect. Vorian leaned back, exhaling sharply. So that's it? You're just done? Arden's voice was gentle, but there was no wavering in it. I'm done being invisible. The meeting continued, but Vorian remained silent, unable to argue without unraveling further. Papers were signed. Temporary executive restructuring was finalized. Arden's title was confirmed. Acting CEO, Hale Dynamics, with full authority. Afterward, as the room emptied, Arden remained seated, letting the weight of everything settle. Tavian approached quietly, placing a file on the table. You handled that with grace, he said softly. Arden looked up, emotion flickering in her eyes. Not sadness, not anger, but release. It still hurts, she admitted. It will, Tavian said. But healing begins when you stop carrying someone else's wounds. Their eyes met, and the space between them tightened again, warm and slow. Tavian reached out instinctually, brushing the back of his fingers against hers in a gesture that wasn't bold or impulsive, just offering comfort. Arden didn't pull away. His touch was nothing like Vorian's had been. It wasn't possessive or demanding. It wasn't claiming. It was gentle, quiet, a question, not an assumption. And for the first time in a long time, Arden let her heart lean into something soft. Tavian, she murmured, a tremor of vulnerability in her voice. He stepped closer, his presence grounding. You're not alone in this, he whispered. Not anymore. Arden lowered her gaze, her breath catching lightly at the nearness. An energy passed between them, not rushed, not chaotic, but warm and steady, pulsing with potential. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt safe, something she had forgotten she deserved. Before either could say more, footsteps echoed in the hall. The world was still moving, and she needed to move with it. But as she rose from the chair, she carried a new truth with her, a truth she had been slow to accept. She wasn't just stepping into leadership. She was stepping into her own life, and for the first time, she wasn't walking alone. The day unfolded slowly after the transition meeting, not because Arden lacked tasks, but because everything felt new, reshaped, realigned. She didn't rush to make grand proclamations or sweeping changes. Instead, she focused on understanding, observing, listening. By midday, she had scheduled quiet check-ins with department leaders gently, restoring projects that had been suspended under Vorian's direction. The scholarship project, the one she had poured her heart into, was the first thing she reinstated. As soon as the team heard her explain why it mattered, they began working with renewed passion. She felt the company breathe again. When the sun dipped low and cast warm gold across the office windows, the executive floor grew quiet. Arden stepped into a small meeting room overlooking the city, letting herself unwind. Her fingers brushed absently over the armrest as she stared at the skyline, a vast stretch of lights that felt both distant and close. The door opened softly behind her. Tavian didn't announce himself. He didn't have to. His presence was distinct, calm, certain, grounding. Arden didn't turn right away, but she felt her heartbeat steady just knowing he was there. I thought you might be here, he said, his voice a warm hum. Arden finally looked over her shoulder. How did you know? Tavian stepped inside, closing the door quietly. This room has a view people go to when they need to think. Your day has been a lot. She huffed a soft laugh, turning back to the glass. That's an understatement. He moved closer, leaving just enough space so she wouldn't feel crowded. If you need a brief escape, I'm offering my company. Arden smiled faintly, small but genuine. I'm not escaping, just adjusting Adjusting is allowed, he murmured. They stood quietly for a moment, watching the city together. The room felt warmer with him in it, but not in a way that overwhelmed her. More like a soft ember glowing in the background, steady and reassuring. You handled everything today with grace, Tavian said gently. People noticed. Arden shook her head. I wasn't trying to prove anything. That's exactly why it worked, he replied. She glanced up at him, studying the sincerity in his expression. Tavian didn't shower her with flattery. His compliments were honest, rooted in observation, the kind that entered softly and lingered. It still doesn't feel real, she admitted. What part? All of it, she breathed. The company, the leadership, the responsibility, the freedom. Tavian exhaled softly, stepping just slightly closer. You've carried responsibility your entire life, Arden. What's new is being allowed to carry it. Her eyes softened at his words. He understood her in ways Vorian never had. Vorian had always seen her gentleness as fragility, her caution as limitation, her kindness as weakness. But Tavian saw it as strength, maybe because he had watched her carefully for years, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet admiration. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. Tavian's eyes warmed, the kind of warmth that stirred something subtle and deep beneath her ribs. You deserve to be seen. The air shifted. Arden felt something pull between them, not forceful, not reckless, but magnetic in its softness. She turned fully to face him, her heart slowing and yet becoming louder in her chest at the same time. Tavian watched her with quiet intensity, as if memorizing the slightest change in her expression. He didn't reach for her. He didn't invade her space, but the closeness between them felt charged, electric in the gentlest way. You've had a long day, he said, his voice lower now. If you want to rest, I can gather the remaining reports and have them ready for you tomorrow morning. Arden took a step closer without thinking. Tavian. His breath hitched, barely, but enough for her to notice. Yes? He said softly. Her voice trembled with honesty. I don't want you to leave yet. He didn't move, but something in him seemed to loosen. A wall, a restraint, a tension he had been holding since the moment he realized how he felt about her. You don't have to be alone tonight, he whispered. Arden's gaze lowered to his chest, where his breath deepened. When she lifted her eyes again, she saw the emotion he had been hiding. Not desire. Alone, but care, respect, longing, and a tenderness that made her heart ache. She reached out, brushing her fingers lightly against his. The contact was small, barely a whisper of touch, but it carried weight. Tavian exhaled slowly, his fingers curling gently around hers in response. Not pulling, not claiming, just holding. Arden stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, close enough that their breaths mingled in the quiet space. Tavian lifted his other hand, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers grazing her cheek in a soft, lingering touch. Her breath trembled. Arden, he murmured, his voice a low gravity that pulled her in. Tell me if this is too soon. She shook her head, her voice soft but certain. It's not too soon. It's just honest. Their foreheads touched, lightly at first, the gentlest connection, warm and fragile and intimate. Arden's hand moved to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his shirt. Tavian's breath deepened, his thumb tracing a slow, reverent line along her cheek. Can I, he whispered, the question trembling with restraint, kiss you? Arden closed the small distance between them, answering without words. Their lips brushed in a soft, delicate kiss. Gentle at first, almost a question. Then she leaned in just a little more, and Tavian met her with warmth, tenderness. A slow-growing heat that wrapped around them like a slow-burning flame. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't wild. It was intimate in the purest way. An exhale, a release, a long-overdue comfort. When the kiss deepened, it did so carefully, with soft breaths and lingering closeness. His hand slid to the small of her back, guiding her gently against him, and her fingers curled. into his shirt as if anchoring herself in the moment she had been afraid to imagine. They pulled apart slowly, breath mingling, foreheads touching again. Arden whispered, "I didn't expect this." Tavian smiled softly. "I felt this for a long time, but I never wanted to cross a line you weren't ready to cross." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he murmured, brushing his thumb over her lower lip, "I want to move at your pace. Your heart sets the rhythm." Her own heart steadied at that, a new rhythm, steady and warm. She leaned into him, resting her head lightly against his chest. Tavian wrapped an arm around her, holding her gently, protectively. The warmth between them deepened, settling into something unmistakable. Not infatuation, not distraction, something deeper, something real. For the first time in years, Arden felt safe in someone's arms. Not controlled, not dismissed, not belittled. Safe. She closed her eyes, letting herself feel the moment fully. The beginning of something she didn't need to rush, didn't need to fear. Tavian kissed the top of her head, soft and reverent. The world outside continued moving, but in that quiet room overlooking the lights of the city, Arden felt time slow, and her future begin to bloom. Arden didn't sleep much that night, not because she was restless, but because her mind kept replaying the quiet moments she shared. With Tavian, the warmth of his hands, the breath-soft closeness, the kiss that lingered like a gentle echo on her lips. She wasn't rushing into anything. She wasn't trying to replace the love she had lost. But something had shifted, the smallest spark awakening after years of being dimmed. A spark she didn't want to ignore anymore. The next morning, she walked into Hale Dynamics with a steadiness she had never carried before. Eyes followed her through the lobby. Not with judgment, but with curiosity, respect, maybe even relief. Leadership under Vorian often felt tense, unpredictable. Arden brought something different, something calmer, something hopeful. Tavian met her by the elevators, holding his usual portfolio. His expression softened as soon as he saw her, a subtle warmth, the kind that said, "I'm glad you're here." Arden felt a flutter in her chest but kept her composure. "Good morning." His reply came softly, "Morning." They shared a brief moment of quiet that carried the memory of last night before both stepped into the elevator. The day began with meetings, onboarding briefings, strategy sessions, introductions to division heads who had only seen her from afar. Arden took her time listening, absorbing ideas, showing that her leadership was rooted in understanding, not authority. People responded to her openness. Some even smiled for the first time in months. Her presence made the air feel lighter. But by noon, as she returned to her office, she found someone waiting inside. Vorian. He stood before her desk, posture stiff, eyes hard and unreadable. Arden paused in the doorway, the weight of the past, the betrayal, the humiliation, lingering between them like an unwelcome shadow. "You can't avoid me forever," he said quietly. Arden stepped in, closing the door behind her. She kept her voice steady. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm setting boundaries." Vorian scoffed, though his shoulders were tense. "You really think you can run this place?" "I already am," Arden said softly. He inhaled sharply, frustration flickering across his face. "You think this power play makes you strong?" Arden shook her head. "This isn't about power, it's about accountability. And respect." Vorian's jaw tightened. "You're angry about the woman." Arden held his gaze, pain flickering in her chest but not controlling her. "I'm hurt, and I'm done making myself small for someone who doesn't value me." Something in Vorian's expression broke, just a crack but visible. Regret? Fear? Arden couldn't tell, and she didn't try to understand him anymore. His choices were his own. "What do you want from me?" he muttered. "Nothing," Arden replied. "I'm finally choosing myself." He stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then he left, not with the confidence he always wore, but with the weight of someone realizing he had lost something he never appreciated. When the door closed, Arden let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She turned toward the window, letting the sunlight wash over her, grounding herself. Moments later, there was a gentle knock. Tavian stepped in, careful, observant. "Are you okay?" Arden nodded slowly. "Yes." That was a conversation that needed to happen. Tavian approached with measured steps. "You don't have to face this alone." She met his eyes, warm, steady, inviting without pressure. "I know." Their silence was soft, intimate in its own way. Tavian hesitated, then said, "There's something you need to see before the afternoon briefing." Arden followed him to the conference hall downstairs. As they approached, she heard the faint hum of voices. When she stepped inside, she froze. Employees were gathered, dozens of them, and as soon as they saw her, a ripple of applause filled the room, not wild or dramatic, but heartfelt, sincere. Workers from every department stood tall, clapping gently as Arden walked forward. A woman from the engineering division approached with shy confidence. "We just wanted to say, thank you. The company already feels different." A man from finance added, "It's been a long time since someone actually listened to us." Another chimed in softly, "We believe in you." Arden felt her eyes sting, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming swell of gratitude. She hadn't expected support. She wasn't chasing approval, but seeing so many people find hope in her leadership made something settle firmly in her heart. She bowed her head slightly, gathering herself. "I'm honored," she said softly, "and I promise this will always be a company where your voices matter." The applause grew again. Tavian watched from the side, a gentle smile forming, one that held pride, affection, and something deeper. Something he wasn't ready to say aloud yet, but couldn't hide entirely. After the crowd dispersed, he walked to Arden's side. "That was well deserved," he murmured. Arden looked up at him, her heart softening. "I'm still trying to believe this is real." He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "Believe it, because you earned every moment." Their eyes locked, and the air between them warmed, not with urgency, but with gentle gravity. The pull of two hearts slowly finding their way toward each other. Arden felt her breath shift, her pulse quicken in a tender, familiar way. Tavian's hand brushed hers lightly, just barely, sending a soft, comforting heat through her. She didn't move away. He leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "Whatever comes next, you don't have to face it alone." And in that moment, Arden realized something profound. Her old life had ended. Her awakening was complete, and she was stepping into a future shaped not by fear, but by choice, by leadership, by strength, by hope, and maybe, slowly, by love. Arden spent the following morning reviewing reports in her new office, a space that no longer felt like a museum of Vorian's ego, but a room slowly reshaping itself around her presence. She had removed the harsh metallic sculptures he favored, replaced the stiff leather chairs with softer, more welcoming ones, and placed a single potted plant by the window. The small touches mattered. They felt like acts of reclamation. She sat at her desk now, scanning through department summaries, noticing the patterns she had missed before, the quiet frustrations, the suggestions ignored, the innovations dismissed. Vorian's leadership had been efficient, yes, but it left no room for creativity, empathy, or forward-thinking values. A gentle knock pulled her from her thoughts. Tavian entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Arden blinked, surprised by the warmth that immediately rose in her chest. "For you," he said, setting 1 cup down in front of her. "I remember you like your coffee with a little cream and too much sugar." Arden's lips curled softly. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything you don't realize you share," he replied, a shy but intentional softness in his tone. Heat gathered beneath her ribs, quiet, unexpected, but welcome. She took the cup, inhaling the warmth. "Thank you. Really." He slid into the chair across from her, not the stiff corporate seat, but the softer one she had placed there deliberately. It felt symbolic somehow. She had made space for a new chapter. And for him. "We have a full afternoon ahead," Tavian said, pulling out a small agenda. The innovation team wants your approval on a project revival, finance needs budget, allocation, and the community branch wants to meet with you personally. They were thrilled to hear that the scholarship initiative is back. Arden's heart warmed at that. Good, they deserve the support. Tavian smiled, slow, warm, approving. You're changing the company already. She didn't feel like she was changing anything yet. She wasn't transforming the world, or delivering radical speeches, or rewriting the company's entire structure. She was simply listening, observing, being human. And somehow, that alone was creating transformation. A quiet moment passed between them. Tavian's gaze lingered, full of something gentle and unspoken. She felt the same warmth returning, the same soft pull that had surprised her the night before. But before either of them could lean into the moment, her office phone rang. Tavian's eyes flicked toward it. Do you want me to answer that? Arden shook her head. No, it's fine. She picked up the receiver. This is Arden. A familiar voice responded, sharp and cold. We need to talk. Vorian. The air shifted instantly. Arden straightened, her fingers tightening on the phone. We already did. Not about the board, he said. About us. She closed her eyes briefly. She didn't want this right now. Not at the start of a day she felt hopeful about, not in the middle of finding her footing. I'm working, Arden said calmly. If you have something to say, send an email. You're my wife, Vorian snapped. You can't handle this through email. She exhaled softly. I can handle it however I choose. Silence. Then a slow, simmering response. I'm coming up. He hung up before she could answer. Arden set the phone down gently, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her composure. Tavian watched her with quiet concern. Do you want me to stay? He asked. She hesitated. Part of her wanted to face Vorian alone, prove to herself she no longer needed protection from him. Another part, the wounded, human part, wanted Tavian nearby, steady like he always was. She lifted her eyes to his. Stay, please. Tavian nodded. I'm here. The door opened sharply moments later. Vorian entered without knocking. He looked the same, polished, expensive, confident, but there was something different in his expression now. A crack beneath the facade, a desperation he couldn't hide. He froze when he saw Tavian. What is he doing here? Arden remained seated, calm, grounded, working, like I am. This is personal, Vorian snapped. No, Arden said softly. This is exactly why boundaries exist. Vorian's jaw tightened as he took a step forward. Arden, listen to me. You're angry. She rose to her feet gently. I'm not angry. You're hurt. I was hurt, she corrected. But you don't get to use that to pull me back. Vorian inhaled sharply, frustration building. I made mistakes, all right? You think I'm proud of what happened? You think I wanted you to see? Arden's voice trembled, but she didn't falter. You didn't care whether I saw or not. You never cared how things affected me. The silence after that line was heavy. Vorian's eyes flicked to Tavian again. So what? He's your bodyguard now. Arden's voice softened, but carried more steel than ever before. He's someone who respects me. That's something you haven't done in a very long time. The color drained slightly from Vorian's face. His voice lowered. Arden, I don't want to lose you. Her heart tugged painfully, but not because she still loved him. It was because hearing those words after years of silence felt like an echo arriving far too late. She nodded gently. I know, but losing me wasn't a moment. It happened over years of choices. Vorian swallowed hard, staring at her as if seeing the truth for the first time. Is this really what you want? To end us? To move on? Arden didn't look away. Yes. Tavian's breath shifted. Subtle, warm, steady beside her. Vorian exhaled sharply, stepping back. The control he always relied on slipped through his fingers like sand. For the first time, he looked small, mortal, defeated. We're not done, he said, though the words lacked conviction. Arden answered softly. We've been done for a long time." He left without another word. The door closed, and Arden's breath shuddered out of her chest. She sank back into her chair, her hands trembling. Tavian moved closer. "Arden, are you all right?" She nodded slowly, though tears pricked the edges of her eyes. Not out of longing for Vorian, but out of release. Closure. "Yes," she whispered. "For the first time, I think I am." Tavian knelt beside her chair, taking her hands gently into his. Warm, steady, grounding. "You don't have to be strong every second," he murmured. Her eyes met his, and something deeper than comfort passed between them, something that lingered, something that grew a little more each time he spoke to her like she mattered. "I'm not strong right now," she whispered. "You are," he said, squeezing her hands softly. "You're just finally allowing yourself to feel it." Their faces were close again, close enough for warmth to pass between them, close enough for the air to thicken with quiet, lingering tension. Arden inhaled deeply, her voice soft. "Thank you for staying." Tavian brushed a thumb across the back of her hand, his touch slow and reverent. "I'll stay as long as you need." She didn't pull away, and for the first time, she felt the old chapter close behind her, fully, finally, as a new one opened with soft, steady light. The rest of the day moved like a slow current, steady but heavy, with everything that had just happened. Even after Vorian left the office, a faint echo of his presence clung to the air, but Arden wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't falling apart. She was anchoring herself. Tavian remained close the entire afternoon, not hovering, not pressing, just present. Whenever she glanced toward him during meetings, she caught the same look in his eyes, protective, warm, silently supportive. It steadied her in ways she didn't know she needed. By early evening, Arden finished her final meeting. The hallway lights dimmed softly as the building shifted into after-hours mode. Workers trickled out, giving her small nods of respect as they passed. Tavian approached her office door slowly. "You've had a long day. Let me order dinner for you. You shouldn't go home hungry." Arden smiled, tired but touched. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Tavian replied. "That's why I want to." Her heart warmed at that. Something light would be perfect. While Tavian stepped out to place the order, Arden leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The events of the past week swept through her mind. The boardroom, humiliation, the betrayal through the glass door, the loneliness of walking away, the shock of discovering her ownership, and Tavian's quiet presence weaving through every step of her transformation. She had changed, not into someone new, but into someone she had forgotten she could be. A soft knock stirred her from her thoughts. Tavian pushed the door open with his shoulder, balancing a paper bag and 2 bottled drinks. Arden laughed under her breath. "You didn't have to carry all of that yourself." "I wanted to impress you," he said lightly, setting the food down. Arden blinked, warmth blooming beneath her ribs. "You already do." The room thickened with quiet emotion, subtle, tender, unspoken. Tavian hesitated, then took the seat beside her, not across from her, close enough that their knees brushed lightly when he shifted. They ate quietly at first, simple takeout, warm and comforting. Arden hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite hit her tongue. "You haven't eaten since breakfast," Tavian murmured. "You need to take care of yourself too." She smiled. "I'm working on it." His expression softened. "You're working on everything, and you're doing it beautifully." Arden looked up slowly, feeling heat rise beneath her skin. "I'm trying." "You're succeeding," he corrected gently. They finished dinner, and the silence that followed was not heavy. It was soft, familiar, a moment suspended between them. Tavian leaned back in his chair slightly, watching her. "Can I ask you something?" Arden tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Of course." He hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but out of care. "Do you regret what happened earlier? Telling him the truth?" Arden exhaled softly. "No. I regret not saying it sooner." Tavian nodded, his gaze warm. "I'm proud of you." Arden's breath caught. Proud. Yes, he said, leaning in just slightly. You faced someone who hurt you for years, and you didn't crumble. You didn't run. You stood your ground. Something inside her softened, melted even, hearing those words spoken so gently. She lowered her gaze to their hands resting near each other on the table. Not touching, but close enough to feel the possibility hovering in the space between. "Tavian," she said softly. He angled toward her. "Yes?" She lifted her eyes, vulnerability shimmering in them. "I don't know what I'm doing, or where this is going, but when you're here, I don't feel afraid." Tavian reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When his fingers brushed the back of her hand, she didn't move. The warmth of his touch felt grounding, safe. "You don't have to know where it's going," he whispered. "Just let it grow. Let it be whatever it's meant to be." Arden's breath trembled, not with fear, but with the quiet intensity of being seen, really seen, for the first time in so long. Tavian's thumb brushed against her hand in a slow, soothing circle. Not rushed, not forceful, just present. "You deserve someone who listens," he murmured. "Someone who chooses you. Someone who doesn't take you for granted." Arden swallowed, her voice barely audible. "And you think that's you?" His smile was soft, earnest, vulnerable. "I think I want it to be." A long, quiet moment passed, a moment in which neither of them looked away. Arden shifted closer. Tavian's breath deepened. Their faces neared each other with unspoken gravity, the air thickening between them like warm honey. Slow, sweet, inevitable. But she stopped just before their lips met. Tavian froze, searching her eyes. Arden whispered, "I want this, but I want to take it slowly." His hand rose to cup her cheek gently, his touch reverent. "Then we'll take it as slow as you need." Their foreheads touched, breath mingling, hearts steadying into the same rhythm. The intimacy wasn't rushed, wasn't heated passion, wasn't desperation, it was connection. Soft, warm, tender connection. Arden closed her eyes, letting herself feel the closeness, the safety, the promise of something real forming between them. When she pulled back slightly, Tavian didn't chase the moment. He let her breathe. Let her choose. "Thank you," she whispered. "For today, for staying, for everything." Tavian smiled softly. "Always." They packed the food containers quietly, and when Tavian walked her to the elevator, he pressed the button for her, stepping back, but keeping his eyes on her. "Text me when you get home," he murmured. "I will," she replied. Just before the elevator doors closed, their eyes held one final moment of soft, warm tension, slow burning, full of possibility. Arden rode down alone, but for the first time, she didn't feel alone at all. She felt supported. She felt valued. She felt wanted. And as the elevator descended floor by floor, a quiet truth settled into her heart. She was ready for whatever came next. Not because she was unafraid, but because she finally believed she deserved more than the life she left behind. Arden's apartment felt different when she walked in that night. Not because anything had physically changed, everything was exactly where she left it, but because she had changed. There was a new steadiness in her steps, a quiet confidence in her breath, and a calmness in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. She set her bag down gently and stood for a moment in the living room, letting the silence wrap around her. Her phone vibrated softly. A message from Tavian. "Home yet?" Arden smiled. "Just walked in," she replied. "Thank you again for today." The three dots appeared immediately. "I'm here, anytime you need me." Warmth spread through her chest. She placed her phone down and headed for the bathroom, craving a hot shower to wash the day off her skin. Steam filled the room. As the water ran over her shoulders, Arden closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel everything she had suppressed for years, the exhaustion, the relief, the grief, the hope. She lingered in the warmth longer than usual. When she stepped out, wrapped in a soft towel, she felt lighter, cleaner, renewed. She changed into comfortable clothes, brewed a cup of herbal tea, and sat by the window overlooking the quiet city. The skyline twinkled back at her like scattered diamonds, and for once she didn't feel small in comparison. She felt aligned with it, like one of those lights, glowing quietly but distinctly. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the stillness. "Get some rest. You earned it, Tavian." She bit her lip, a soft laugh escaping her. How had he become such a comforting presence so quickly? Or maybe he had always been that, and she was only now allowing herself to see it. Arden typed back, "Good night, Tavian." She set her phone aside and finally allowed her body to sink under the blankets. Sleep took her gently, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't dream of loss. She dreamed of growth. Morning came with soft sunlight cutting through the curtains. Arden stirred slowly, stretching under the blankets. She felt rested, truly rested. After dressing, she headed back to Hale Dynamics with a quiet purpose humming in her chest. The moment she entered the building, whispers rose around her, not the gossipy kind, but filled with curiosity, admiration, and uncertainty. Arden didn't shy away from them. She greeted employees, smiled at familiar faces, and walked with measured confidence. On the 45th floor, Tavian stood outside her office door, holding a stack of folders. When he saw her, his expression softened into something warm and unmistakably personal. "Morning," he said. Arden felt that familiar flutter beneath her ribs. "Good morning. You look rested," Tavian said, in that way of his that made a simple observation feel like a compliment. "I slept well," she replied softly. "Thank you for checking on me." Tavian held out the folders. "These are the documents for your 9 a.m. meeting. I also included summaries in case you'd like to review key points ahead of time." She accepted them. "I appreciate your thoroughness." His lips curved slightly. "I like making things easier for you." The air shifted, gentle, warm, quietly charged. Arden stepped into her office, and Tavian followed, stopping at a respectful distance. "Before the meeting starts," he said, "there's something we should discuss." Arden looked up, curious. "What is it?" Tavian stepped closer, slowly, always giving her space to choose. His voice dropped to a softer tone. "Vorian hasn't returned calls from the board. They're concerned about his behavior. I want to be sure you're prepared, in case he tries to insert himself again." Arden exhaled, steady. "I'm not afraid of him." "I know," Tavian murmured, "but I still want to protect you." Her heart tugged at those words. "I spent too long being afraid of confrontation," she said quietly. "I won't allow myself to shrink again." Tavian's gaze warmed with admiration. "That strength you're finding, it looks good on you." Her breath hitched, not visibly, but enough for her to feel it. "Tavian," she whispered. He took another careful step toward her, not touching, not assuming. Just near enough that she felt his warmth. "You don't ever have to face him alone," he said softly. "Not while I'm here." Arden looked up, eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Thank you." Their closeness deepened, subtle but unmistakable. The kind of intimacy that didn't need to be physical to be felt. A soft knock on the door broke the moment. Marin poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Arden, you might want to see this." Arden straightened. "What's wrong?" Marin held up a tablet with a news feed open. A headline blazed across the screen. "CEO Vorian Hale seen leaving private club after late-night incident. Investors question stability at Hale Dynamics." Arden's stomach tightened. The article continued to scroll automatically, showing photos of Vorian looking disheveled, surrounded by reporters, his expression strained, almost frantic. Tavian's expression darkened slightly, not with anger, but with concern. Arden inhaled slowly. "He's unraveling." Marin lowered the tablet. "The board wants to know how you want to handle this." Arden stood tall, her eyes fixed on the window overlooking the city. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't uncertain. She was ready. With a quiet, steady breath, she turned back to Tavian and Marin. "We'll handle it," she said, "but we'll do it with grace." Tavian stepped closer, pride quietly glowing in his eyes. "Just say the word." "I'm with you." Arden's gaze lingered on him, warmth tightening in her chest. "I know," she said softly, "and that means more than you realize." The moment settled between them, soft, meaningful, filled with possibility. Arden turned toward the door, ready to face whatever storm came next. This time, she wasn't walking blind. She wasn't walking broken. She wasn't walking alone. She was walking forward, into the fire she was finally strong enough to withstand. Arden entered the boardroom with a calmness that surprised even her. The long polished table, the sweeping city skyline behind the high glass windows, the tense faces of executives who had once barely acknowledged her presence, all of it felt strangely manageable now. The board members sat stiffly, their expressions a blend of worry, embarrassment, and calculation. Arden could read it instantly. Vorian's late-night scandal had thrown them into a panic. They needed stability, reassurance, leadership. She took her seat at the head of the table, a place she never imagined sitting, and now, somehow, the only place that felt right. Tavian stood beside her as her advisor, his quiet presence grounding her. He didn't hover or overshadow her, but he stayed close enough that she could feel his steadiness wrapping around her like a protective layer. One of the older board members cleared his throat first. "Mrs. Hale, we appreciate you coming in so quickly. The situation with Vorian has caused some concern." Arden folded her hands neatly on the table. "I understand, and I'm here to address it clearly." A younger executive leaned forward. "The media is running with the story. Some investors fear instability in leadership." Another murmured, "We need to know if Vorian intends to resume control or interfere with your authority." A silence fell, thick with unspoken fear. Arden didn't blink. "Vorian will not be resuming control, and he will not be interfering with my leadership." The room quieted, every eye focused on her. She continued, her voice steady and composed. "The company has faced internal turmoil for years under an environment of intimidation and inconsistency. My goal isn't to shame anyone, but to bring transparency to the forefront." There it was, what they needed to hear. Tavian watched her with subtle pride in his eyes. She didn't need him to speak. She was doing this on her own. An older woman at the far end adjusted her glasses. "Mrs. Hale, what exactly is your plan moving forward?" Arden took a gentle breath. "To stabilize Hale Dynamics, to rebuild our public trust, and to create a culture where talent thrives instead of being suppressed." Whispers rose around the room, not resistance, but cautious hope. She continued, "The truth is simple. Vorian is struggling. He needs time away from the company, not pressure to perform. For his well-being and for Hale Dynamics, I will—" The boardroom door slammed open. Everyone jolted. Vorian stood in the doorway, disheveled, pale, eyes red as if he hadn't slept. His suit jacket was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair unkempt. He was breathing hard, like he had run all the way to the room. "Arden," he growled, "we need to talk." The room froze. Arden didn't flinch. She kept her posture straight, her expression neutral. "Vorian," she said calmly, "you're interrupting a board meeting." He stepped forward, voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You think you can push me out? You think you can sit in my seat and act like you're in charge?" One of the board members whispered, "Oh no." Arden stood slowly, keeping the table between them. Tavian subtly shifted his weight, not moving toward Vorian, but ready if needed. "I'm not acting," Arden said softly. "I'm fulfilling a legal and necessary responsibility." "You're my wife," he spat. "You don't replace me." There it was. The old Vorian, the one who saw her as property, the one who believed she existed in his shadow. But Arden wasn't that woman anymore. She held his gaze, unwavering. "I didn't replace you. You removed yourself when you broke trust, broke agreements, and broke your own stability." Vorian's breath shook. His chest rose and fell erratically. "You're making a mistake," he muttered. "The company needs me. You need me." Arden felt Tavian's presence behind her, silent, steady, supportive. She took a breath and stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "Vorian, the company doesn't need chaos, and I don't need someone who chooses destruction over partnership." The board sat in stunned silence. Vorian blinked, his face crumpling for a moment with something almost like pain. "You're choosing them over me," he whispered. "I'm choosing myself," Arden replied quietly. For the first time, her words hit him like a strike. He staggered back a step, swallowing hard. Then his eyes darted to Tavian, the man standing close to Arden, the man who watched her as though she mattered, the man who didn't need to raise his voice to be impactful. Vorian's expression twisted in jealousy. "So that's it," he hissed. "You think he's better than me?" Arden didn't look away. "I think he respects me." Vorian froze. For a single heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. Then he laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh, and turned toward the door. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Not by a long shot." He stormed out, the door slamming behind him so hard the glass panels rattled. Silence followed, a thick, heavy silence. Arden exhaled slowly and turned back to the board, calm settling over her like a soft blanket. "My decision remains firm," she said, "and I stand by it." No one questioned her again. When the meeting adjourned, Arden stepped out into the hallway, tension finally releasing from her shoulders. The adrenaline faded, leaving her with a quiet tremble in her hands. Tavian closed the boardroom door behind them and moved closer, his voice gentle. "Are you all right?" Arden nodded faintly. "I expected resistance. I didn't expect that." Tavian reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and rested his hand lightly on her arm. Warm, reassuring, grounding. "You handled yourself with strength," he murmured. "You didn't let him shake you." Arden swallowed, emotion swelling in her chest. "I didn't feel strong." "You were," he said softly. "I've never seen anything like it." Their eyes met and stayed. The hallway around them faded into a blur. His touch lingered. Her breath softened. The space between them tightened with unspoken emotion. Arden felt it, that warm current humming in her chest whenever he was near. "Tavian," she whispered. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I'm right here." She didn't move away, and he didn't rush her, didn't push, didn't assume, just waited. She let out a soft exhale, and the tension between them deepened, quiet, warm, intense in its restraint. For a moment, Arden forgot about boardrooms and scandals and broken marriages. All she felt was the presence of a man who stood beside her, not above her. A man who didn't try to control her light, but reflected it. "Tavian," she said again, voice barely above a whisper. His fingers gently slid down her arm, stopping just above her wrist. A touch light enough to let her pull away, firm enough to let her know he wasn't afraid to be close. Her breath shivered. Then she stepped just a little closer, not touching, just choosing him, choosing this quiet safety, choosing this new beginning. And Tavian's expression softened with something unmistakable, something tender, something hopeful, something that felt a lot like the start of something real. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Arden. Meetings, reports, cautious congratulations from employees who were slowly growing confident under her leadership. It all blended together. Yet through every conversation, she felt Tavian's presence like a steady hum in the back of her awareness. When evening fell, she stepped out of her office to find the floor mostly empty, lights dimmed, desks quiet. The city outside glowed in warm, scattered gold. Tavian was still there. He stood by the window, reviewing documents, his sleeves rolled up, and his expression thoughtful. When he noticed her, he straightened, a gentle warmth softening his eyes. "Long day," he said. Arden offered a tired smile. "Eventful, to say the least." He walked toward her slowly. "I stayed because I wanted to make sure you didn't walk out alone tonight." Something tightened in her chest, something soft, warm, dangerous in a beautiful way. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to." Their eyes held for a moment. Quiet, charged. Arden exhaled softly. After today, I'm not sure what tomorrow will look like. Tavian stepped closer, his voice low and certain. Tomorrow looks like you leading this company with strength you never knew you had. She swallowed, her heart fluttering at the conviction in his tone. And what about Vorian? She asked softly. Tavian paused, then spoke with quiet honesty. He's losing control of the one thing he thought he owned. That kind of man. He'll push back. But you're not alone in facing him. Arden looked down, touched by the sincerity in his voice. You've supported me more in weeks than he did in years. Tavian reached out, brushing his fingertips lightly along her forearm, a touch so gentle it made the air feel warm. Arden, he murmured, you deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be cherished. Her breath trembled, not from fear, but from the ache of finally being understood. Thank you, she whispered. He leaned in, just slightly, not enough to assume, just enough to let her decide. And she did. She stepped closer, closing the last inch between them, until they stood almost chest to chest. Tavian's breath caught softly, his eyes flicking to her lips before meeting her gaze again. The moment warmed, deepened, stretched. He lifted his hand, touching her cheek with quiet reverence, a touch that asked permission rather than taking it. Arden's eyes fluttered shut. Tavian's forehead eased gently against hers, the softest connection of skin meeting skin. There, breaths mingling in a quiet exchange that felt more intimate than any kiss she had known. No urgency, no fear, just presence, just possibility. Arden, he whispered, voice rough with emotion. If this is too soon, it's not, she murmured, opening her eyes to look into his. It's the first thing that's felt right in a long time. He smiled, soft, warm, almost relieved. His thumb brushed her cheek in a slow, tender sweep. She leaned into his touch. For a long moment they stayed there, not rushing, not pushing, just letting their closeness breathe. Then Arden pulled back with a gentle, shy smile. "Walk me out," she asked. Tavian nodded, his smile matching hers. "Always." They left the office together, side by side, their shoulders brushing lightly. A quiet beginning forming in the reflective glow of the nighttime city. And for once, Arden didn't look back at the tower with dread. She looked forward, toward something new, something warm, something that felt like hope. The following morning, Hale Dynamics buzzed with a quiet tension. News outlets were still replaying footage of Vorian's late-night outburst, and employees whispered anxiously in corners, unsure what the company's future held. Arden stepped into the lobby with a composed calm that immediately drew eyes. Her presence carried a weight it hadn't before, not fear, not hesitation, but earned authority. As she walked toward the elevators, employees straightened, offering respectful nods. She returned each one with a soft smile. She wasn't ruling by force. She was leading by steadiness. When she reached her office floor, Tavian was already waiting, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, yet eyes intent on her. "You ready?" he asked gently. "Yes," she replied. "Whatever today brings, I'm ready." They entered her office, and before she could sit, Marin rushed in, slightly breathless. "Vorian is downstairs," she said. "He's demanding a meeting." Arden didn't react visibly. A small exhale, nothing more. Tavian stepped a little closer, not touching her but close enough that she felt his warmth steady her. "You don't owe him anything." "I know," she whispered. But she also knew she couldn't run from the confrontation forever. "Send him up," she said softly. Marin nodded and slipped out. The room felt heavier for a moment. Not suffocating, just full of something she needed to face. Tavian watched her carefully, his eyes gentle. "You don't have to do this alone," he murmured. Arden met his gaze. "But I do have to do it." He nodded, not arguing, just understanding. Moments later, the door opened. Vorian stepped in. He looked worn, darker shadows under his eyes, a stiffness in his shoulders, a bitterness clinging to his posture. "Arden," he said, voice tight, "we need to talk." Tavian didn't move. Arden lifted her chin. "All right," she replied calmly. "Talk." Vorian shot Tavian a glare. "Alone." "No," Arden said simply. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of him." Vorian's jaw tightened. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to me?" Arden didn't respond immediately. She simply watched him, the man she once loved, the man who once held her heart gently, then crushed it. "You did this to yourself," she said softly. "That company was my life," he snapped. "I built it, and now I'm saving it." That hit him, visibly. He stared at her, searching her face, maybe looking for the woman who once adored him, but she wasn't there anymore, not in the way he wanted. "You think he—" Vorian flicked his eyes toward Tavian again. "Is better than me. You think he cares more?" Arden's breath caught, but she kept her voice steady. "He respects me," she said, "and that is more than you ever gave." Vorian's face twisted, pain and anger mixing into something unstable. "He's replacing me," he muttered. "You're replacing me." Arden shook her head gently. "No, I'm moving on. There's a difference." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Vorian spoke again, but softer. "You really don't love me anymore, do you?" Arden hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because the truth held a weight she didn't want to wield carelessly. "No," she said quietly. "Not in the way I used to." Vorian swallowed hard. "I thought you'd always be there. That was the problem," she whispered. "You thought I'd stay no matter how much you hurt me." His face fell, but Arden didn't waver. "I deserve peace, Vorian," she continued. "I deserve kindness. I deserve partnership." Her eyes shifted toward Tavian, just for a second, and something unspoken passed between them. Vorian saw it, and the realization shattered something inside him. Without another word, he turned away and walked out, closing the door behind him more gently than she expected. When the silence settled, Arden finally exhaled, shaky but relieved. Tavian stepped closer, not touching her, just offering his presence. "You handled that with grace," he murmured. Arden looked up at him, eyes soft but steady. It was time to let go. Tavian studied her for a moment, the strength in her posture, the vulnerability in her breath, the deep exhaustion beneath her calm. "You're not alone," he whispered. This time, Arden didn't hesitate. She stepped into him, leaning against his chest, not collapsing, not breaking, just resting, allowing herself to feel supported. His arms wrapped around her, slow and careful, warmth enveloping her in a way that felt safe. Right, needed. Arden closed her eyes as her breath steadied, her cheek resting against him. For the first time, she felt the weight of her past fall away, and the promise of something new begin to take shape. Arden didn't go home immediately after Vorian's confrontation. Instead, she stayed in her office for an extra hour, letting the quiet settle around her. The sunset filtered through the glass windows, painting her office in warm amber light. It softened everything, her thoughts, her heart, even the exhaustion pressing on her shoulders. Tavian remained nearby, working at the small table across from her, not leaving unless she dismissed him. But she didn't. His presence didn't overwhelm, it steadied her. When she finally rose from her chair, he set down his pen. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, giving him a small, grateful smile. They stepped into the elevator together. The moment the doors closed, the silence became heavier, fuller. A slow pull of unspoken feelings gathering between them. As the elevator moved, Tavian turned to her, his voice quiet. Today was a turning point. Arden looked up at him. "It felt like an ending and a beginning," he said softly. Their eyes met, held, warmth expanding between them like slow-blooming heat. The elevator chimed. They walked to her car, steps slowing as they reached the curb. Arden turned toward him, hands folded in front of her. "Thank you for staying by me," she said. "It meant more than I can explain." "You don't have to explain," Tavian replied gently. "I'm here because I want to be." A soft breeze brushed between them, carrying the faint scent of her perfume to him. His breath hitched. He took a small step closer. Not touching, but close enough that their warmth met in the space between them. "Arden," he murmured, "I've been trying to hold back, to give you space, to be what you need, not what I want." A flutter ran through her chest, warm and trembling. "You've been patient," she whispered. "I'm trying to be," he said. "But today, when I saw you stand up for yourself, something shifted." His voice dropped, deepening. "You're stronger than you know, and I care for you more than I planned to." Arden's breath softened. "Tavian." He stepped closer, just one slow, careful step, until their bodies were a breath apart. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently cupped the side of her face, fingertips, brushing her cheek with a tenderness that made her close her eyes. "If this is too soon," he whispered, "tell me to stop." Arden opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with a steadiness she didn't realize she had. "It's not too soon," she said softly. Tavian exhaled, relieved, and lowered his forehead to hers, the soft press of skin to skin sending a warm shiver through her. His hand slid to her jaw, thumb brushing slowly, tender, reverent. Then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It was soft, warm, and full of everything he had held back. A kiss that asked for nothing more than honesty. A kiss that made her breathe deeper, lean closer, feel steady and unafraid. Her hands lifted to his chest, fingers curling into his shirt as their lips met again, deeper this time, but still slow, gentle, savoring. Heat blossomed quietly between them. When he finally pulled back, his breath was unsteady, his forehead still resting against hers. "Arden," he whispered, voice trembling slightly, "I want to be in your life, fully, but only when you're ready." She smiled softly, breath warming against his lips. "I'm ready," she whispered. Tavian brushed his nose lightly against hers, a soft laugh escaping him, warm and relieved, and full of something that made her heart swell. He pulled her into his arms, the embrace slow and secure, his chin resting gently on her shoulder. Arden melted into him, feeling peace settle deep in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt chosen. Not out of obligation, not for image, not for possession, but with sincerity. When they stepped apart, Tavian kissed her forehead lightly. "Let me walk you to your door," he said. She nodded, cheeks warm, heart steady in a way she couldn't explain. They drove to her apartment, their hands brushing occasionally, sending sparks of warmth through both of them. At her door, Tavian pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "Good night, Arden." "Good night," she whispered. And as she watched him leave, her heart didn't feel heavy. It felt full. Tonight wasn't an escape from her past. It was the beginning of something real. Arden woke the next morning with a different kind of stillness inside her. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the calm that comes after making a choice her heart finally agreed with. She moved through her morning routine with a softness she hadn't felt in years. When she arrived at Hale Dynamics, Tavian was already there waiting at her office door. Not hovering, not imposing, just there in that way he naturally seemed to be. When she approached, his face warmed instantly. "Morning," he murmured. "Morning," she replied, her smile blooming without effort. They walked inside together, the door closing gently behind them. Tavian placed a folder on her desk, but neither of them reached for it. Instead, he stepped closer, a slow, careful movement, giving her all the space to choose. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Lighter," she said. "Stronger. And last night?" His voice dipped just slightly, warmth threading through the question. She met his eyes. It felt right. A slow breath left him. He stepped closer. She didn't step back. "Arden," he said quietly, "I care about you deeply. But I want you to be sure this isn't just a reaction to everything with Vorian." She shook her head gently. "Tavian, last night wasn't about escaping anything. It was about choosing something that feels honest." His expression softened, eyes searching hers, finding no hesitation. He lifted a hand, brushing her cheek with the back of his fingers. The touch was featherlight, but full of meaning. Arden leaned into it, her breath catching softly. Tavian stepped closer, his body just a breath from hers, heat radiating gently between them. "I want to show you what it feels like to be valued," he murmured. Arden's heartbeat fluttered, not from fear, but from the tenderness in his voice. He dipped his head slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met again, soft, warm, deeper than last night. A slow kiss that tasted like trust and quiet longing. Her hands slid up to his shoulders as his arms circled her waist, pulling her closer with careful strength. The kiss deepened, growing warmer, slower, full of unspoken emotion. The room seemed to fade, the desk, the windows, the city below, leaving. Only the two of them suspended in a moment that felt inevitable. When they finally broke apart, their breaths mingled in soft, warm exhales. "Arden," he whispered against her lips. "I don't want to rush anything." "You're not," she whispered back, her forehead resting against his. "I want this. I want you." His arms tightened around her waist just slightly, his breath trembling as he pressed a slow kiss. To the curve of her jaw, then her cheek, then the side of her neck, each touch gentle, reverent. She felt warmth bloom low in her chest, spreading through her like soft fire. He lifted her chin with gentle fingers, searching her eyes. "Come home with me tonight," he whispered. "Only if you want to." Arden didn't hesitate. "I want to." Tavian exhaled, a sound of relief, desire, and tenderness all at once. He held her for a long moment, their bodies close, their hearts speaking in the quiet space between breaths. The rest of the workday passed in a warm blur of glances, soft smiles, subtle touches when no one was looking. Arden moved with a lightness Tavian couldn't stop watching. She felt it too, the certainty of something new beginning. When evening came, he drove her to his apartment, a modern space filled with soft lighting and subtle warmth. He guided her inside gently, closing the door behind them. They stood in the quiet, their breaths soft, the air thick with anticipation, but not urgency, just closeness. Tavian stepped toward her, slow and intentional, lifting a hand to brush her hair behind her ear. "You're sure?" he murmured. Arden nodded, her voice soft and steady. "Yes." He kissed her again, deeper this time, still tender but with a rising warmth that made her toes curl. His hand slid around her waist, pulling her against him as she cupped his face, kissing him back with a quiet intensity. Their breaths grew warmer, their touches lingering, their closeness deepening as they slowly moved together toward the dimly lit bedroom. His hands traced her arms with careful reverence, her fingers brushing the back of his neck. Their lips met again and again, soft, heated, loving. The kind of kisses that unfolded slowly, drawing them closer with every heartbeat. He whispered her name against her skin. She whispered his in return. Clothes shifted softly, breaths tangled, warmth pressed against warmth. Their closeness deepened, tender and intimate, not rushed, not forceful. Simply two hearts finally finding the safety they'd been craving. Their silhouettes blended in the soft glow of the room as they sank into the quiet, warm intimacy of the moment. And as the lights dimmed, the scene faded softly to black. Arden woke the next morning, wrapped in a quiet peace she hadn't felt in years. Soft light filtered through Tavian's bedroom curtains, casting warm shadows across the room. He was already awake beside her, watching her with a gentle smile, not possessive, not demanding, simply present. "Good morning," he whispered. Arden breathed out a soft, contented laugh. "Good morning." She felt no guilt, no confusion, only clarity. The chapter she had ended yesterday wasn't just a marriage, it was the version of herself who stayed silent for too long. Now, she felt stronger, rooted, whole. Later that day, she stood before the employees of Hale Dynamics to deliver a brief company-wide message. Her voice carried across the room. Steady, confident, warm. "Hale Dynamics is entering a new chapter," she said. "One grounded in respect, transparency, and humanity. We rise together, or not at all." Applause followed, real, grateful, relieved. Vorian stepped down quietly, eventually seeking treatment and distance from the company he once controlled. Arden didn't hate him. She simply released him. As weeks passed, Hale Dynamics transformed into the healthy environment it was meant to be. Arden led with grace, strength, and compassion, and Tavian remained by her side, not as a shadow, but as a partner who respected her voice. Together, they built not just success, but peace. And every sunrise reminded Arden of one truth she wished she had learned sooner. You don't lose yourself by walking away, you find yourself. Thank you so much for watching this story on Mr. Donovan Stories. If Arden's journey inspired you, if you believe in courage, self-worth, and second chances, then please hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful life-changing stories. Your support helps us grow this community and continue creating stories that move, heal, and inspire.